Hello everyone and welcome back to Mossy Bottom. It's late August. For the last few weeks I've been framing walls and fitting windows in the house, which you can see behind me. I've got one window left to fit, which has to go in before the weather turns cold. I also desperately need to sand the rust off our aging roof and reprime and paint it. And there's about 2 weeks left in which I can do that before the humidity is too high and the nights too cold. And then there's this, the autumn harvest to gather, overrun with weeds as you can see, but still full of produce, it really is. The harvest is ordinarily one of the most pleasurable activities of the year for me, but this year, our first in Finland, well, the pressure is on and I'm really feeling it. There's one comment which for the past 7 years I've read again and again on almost every video I've ever published, and I've never taken it too seriously until now, and it goes like this: I love what you do, but my goodness, isn't it just too much hard work? Historically, all I could do was agree, yes, it certainly is a lot of hard work, and I've never contemplated making a video on the subject, but recently, while we were out digging fence post holes, my partner Angela said something similar. You know, I love this life, but it's just so much hard work. And of course, there's been a lot of pressure on Angela to help set things up this year. We have 5 acres here in Finland compared to 1 acre in Ireland. It's fair to say that's 5 times the work. And we're creating our small holding together from scratch, unlike in Ireland, in which I'd done a lot of that work already in the years before we met. We have a young daughter who we adore, of course, but like most little people, is a lot of hard work too. We're in a new country, learning a new language, and of course, Angela is still completing her medical studies, so the pressure on her is certainly greater than it is on me, and reflecting on the amount of work involved is definitely understandable. You guys think about it, my own dear partner thinks about it, but interestingly, the amount of work involved in this lifestyle is not something I've ever really stopped to think about, until now. Because that's what this video is all about. Is choosing a self-sufficient life just too much hard work? Let's start by viewing this lifestyle through an economic lens. If money saving is the point of all that hard work, then does self-sufficiency really pay for itself? Well, I could and probably should make a video quantifying every self-sufficient activity in terms of cost versus saving. They're all different, of course. But for the moment, let's focus on just 2 activities to give a broad overview. Potatoes, which I grow, and you can see I've just harvested a lot of them, and mushrooms, which I forage. That should give us a good broad picture. For many years now, I've grown enough potatoes to feed myself and my partner, and now my daughter too, year round, because we store them through the winter. But what does it cost to do that? Well, this year I planted 20 kilograms of seed potatoes, 3 different varieties. Earlies to enjoy over the summer and early autumn, and then storing varieties like the ones behind me for the winter. Here in Finland, those seed potatoes cost me 30 euros, and from them I can grow a year's supply. As a family of 3, we eat about 6 kilograms of potatoes per week on average. That's 312 kilograms per year. Yes, we love our spuds, and we consciously eat more because it's the only carbohydrate we can easily grow ourselves. The average price per kilogram for off-the-shelf supermarket potatoes here in Finland is €1.29, though yes, they are cheaper right now because they're in season, but that won't last. So over a year, if we bought potatoes, it would cost us 400 euros circa for the quantity that we eat. Deducting the 30 euros for the seed potatoes, that's a saving of 370 euros a year. And at first glance, that's not bad, is it? But we of course have to consider the work involved. I'm 42. The median monthly wage here in Finland for someone in my age category is 4,213 euros. If we assume that that's 40 working hours per week, that's about 26 euros per hour gross. If we then deduct 20% in income tax, and these are of course just approximations, then that's 21 euros per hour net. So let's consider the hours of work involved in growing a year's supply of spuds. First, to dig the ridges, and don't forget this is on quite a large scale, 6 hours. Add compost or manure, another hour. Plant and recover the potatoes, 3 hours. Mound them as they grow, 2 hours. Weed the rows to reduce competition, another 2 hours. And then the big job, harvesting them, about 8 hours. Finally, process and store them, that's grading by quality and boxing them for the winter, another 3 hours. In total, that's about 25 hours work for one person. Multiply that by the median net hourly wage for someone of my age, and you get 525 euros. That's the amount of money I could have made if I'd spent that same 25 hours in a mainstream job with an average salary for my age. So, through a purely economic lens, I've saved 400 euros in produce, my year's supply of homegrown spuds, but I've spent 30 euros on seed potatoes and I've spent 525 euros on labour. That leaves me 155 euros worse off growing my own than I would be working in a mainstream job and buying potatoes from a shop. Of course, the potatoes I grow are organic, like all my produce. They have 0 food miles, and being homegrown, are arguably better tasting. Those things matter to a lot of people, including me. And there are other variables at play. You might have machinery that reduces the labour involved. You might earn a lot less in your mainstream job, or indeed a lot more. This is a simplification, but the picture it paints is still a pretty telling one when comparing what I grow to the cheapest equivalent in the shop. Back in Ireland, I used to forage mushrooms. I even made a video roaming around the spruce forest near my property trying to identify them. Here in Finland, they're abundant, particularly in the late summer and autumn like now, and especially these chanterelles, which we like to dehydrate and store. We're hoping this season to dehydrate enough to last an entire year. So what's the saving? Well, this is where it gets tricky because chanterelles are very expensive to buy, somewhere between 25 and 50 euros per kilogram when fresh. But the reality is, if I were to buy mushrooms, I would not be able to afford chanterelles or any other wild species. I'd buy your run-of-the-mill brown or white mushrooms, button mushrooms, from the supermarket, which, though not as rich in flavour, are a heck of a lot cheaper and can be cooked and eaten in much the same way. Prices, of course, vary by size and quality and time of year, but I'm going to go with about 8 euros per kilogram as a reasonable average for button mushrooms here in Finland. Of course, I'm not quite sure how many kilos of chanterelles and other edible wild mushrooms I'll be able to harvest this year, and there are lots of other types, boletes in particular. We've been getting lots of birch boletes and penny buns over the last few weeks. But based on their abundance in the forests around the house and how many we'd gathered last year, I'm going to estimate a total fresh harvest of about 20 kilograms, spread over several months of trips to the forest. So that's a saving, assuming I were to buy the equivalent weight of generic button mushrooms, of 160 euros. If I were to buy chanterelles like these at their cheapest, it would be a saving of 500 euros. Of course, those mushrooms are wild, so they have to be found, picked, then transported home, washed, sliced, dehydrated, and bagged. And quantifying that is hard, but I'm going to do my best. It's taken me about an hour to find and pick 2 kilograms of chanterelles here in the forest. That's 10 hours work for 20 kilograms. And washing, slicing, dehydrating, and bagging probably accounts for another 5 hours work, so a very rough approximation would be 15 hours work in total. 15 hours multiplied by 21 euros an hour in my hypothetical mainstream job is 315 euros. So again, through a purely economic lens, I've saved 160 euros in produce, but this time I've spent 315 euros in labour. I'm down 155 euros foraging mushrooms versus working in a mainstream job and buying the cheapest button mushrooms in a supermarket. Of course, if I were to buy chanterelles at 25 euros per kilogram, that being the cheapest realistic price, that would be a saving of 500 euros instead of 160, making it economically profitable. And yes, people here in Finland do forage mushrooms and sell them as a small business. We have neighbours who do just that. But that only works because chanterelles command such a high price, and it's very seasonal. I could also grow the mushrooms myself. I've done that before too in Ireland with mixed results. And that would of course reduce that high labour cost considerably, but it would also incur new costs for the spores and the growing medium. There are many variables to consider, but as a simplification, and that's all this is, the picture yet again suggests that through a purely economic lens, it's better to work and buy than it is to try and be self-sufficient. And I have to admit, that same picture is true of most self-sufficient practices. When taking labour into account, your own labour that is, you might, if you're experienced and efficient, just about break even. But you almost certainly won't save money. But is the equation really that simple? Back in my 20s, I worked in an office job with an average salary for my age. I lived in house shares and rental apartments in cities, and I of course bought everything that I needed because I had no access to outside space. My weekends were my own, which I typically spent trying to recover from the week's work. And that work, even though I was sat on a chair for most of it, left me utterly exhausted. Through our economic lens, I was doing a better job of providing for myself, which I find ironic because I wasn't providing for myself at all in the way that I do now. The only resource I earned was money. But when converting that money into the same things that I now grow, forage, catch, and produce, I was technically better off. But of course, you know how this story goes. I wasn't happy in that life. I know that there are many people who are content in their mainstream jobs and perhaps even derive the same satisfaction from them that I do now from a self-sufficient lifestyle. If you're one of those people, then give yourself a clap because you've arguably won at life. Well done. Unfortunately, a great many people don't feel that way. Personally, the mainstream jobs I had in my 20s felt like treading water. I was working to maintain the roof over my head, the food in my belly, but my passion, my spirit even, was suppressed. And the contentment that I feel now just didn't exist. And that's where viewing the hard work involved in a self-sufficient life through a purely economic lens falls short. Because in that mainstream job, you may well have more money for less work, but if your life lacks fulfillment and those dreams and aspirations get put on the shelf, then is that really any life at all? So let's view that hard work through a different lens, that of time. A far more valuable resource than money, because unlike money, time is something you can never make more of or get back when it's gone. My dad worked his entire adult life as an accountant for a furniture manufacturer. But in what little free time he had, he was able to build a 35-foot sailboat. He made the hull from fiberglass on our front garden. He stitched the sails on a Singer sewing machine on our kitchen table. He built the engine. He was a self-taught engineer, and I wish I had a tenth of his knowledge in that regard. It took him a decade of working weekends because that was the only time that he had to complete it. But eventually, he circumnavigated the British coast in that boat. He was able to separate his work from his passion, and he spent most of the money he had left every month after paying the mortgage, the food and other bills on that passion. Because when he died in his early 50s, he had barely a penny left in the bank. When viewed through the lens of time, I could go and earn that money 5 days a week like he did, to pay for the potatoes and mushrooms and pumpkins and plums and apples and fish and firewood and everything else needed to live. But I would probably then spend what time I had left every week doing the very same things that I do now. I'd garden, I'd grow food, I'd build things, work on the house, split logs, go fishing, because that's what I enjoy. I'd spend my weekdays dreaming of the weekend like I know my dad did, and my weekends dreading Monday morning. You know, it's been so long since I dreaded Mondays that I almost forgot that that was a thing, but it certainly used to be in my life, as I'm sure it still is for so many of the population. Yes, I could spend my life earning money like my dad did, and so many of you do, and who knows, I might even find a job that I enjoy. But when the alternative is spending every day of every week doing the thing that I know I love, who cares if I'm a bit worse off? I certainly don't. Money is just a tool. Time is the most precious thing we have. And if I can get by economically, then that's enough. And unlike a lot of people, I really mean that. I'm living it. So, back to the question that I began this video with. Is choosing a self-sufficient life just too much hard work? And the answer is yes. It is too much hard work. And for most people, that hard work doesn't make sense, because hard work is all it will ever be. To me, it just doesn't feel like work because I enjoy it so much. And not because I enjoy digging up potatoes in the rain until my back is screaming, or stacking firewood in the winter with numb fingers, or dripping with sweat like I am now in a summer heat wave because I've got a fence to put up. The work is work, and it is hard. What I enjoy is the big picture, creating a system, my system, doing things how I want, when I want, painting the picture that's in my imagination, being in control. I think what I can liken this lifestyle to most closely is starting a business, except a business in which the objective isn't to make money, but to reduce costs. The creative and intellectual satisfaction is probably very similar. Angela commented in one of her early blogs about how much pleasure I got this winter quantifying the square footage of my firewood stack, all cut from our own trees. And it's true. I stood there many times once that work was done, just staring at my log pile like a squirrel admiring its stash of nuts. And indeed, I feel the same way about potatoes and plums and mushrooms and apples and everything else I'm able to produce. Heck, even compost gives me that same thrill, and I stared at that for a few hours too. If this was a business, then that would be my gross profit, and contemplating it makes me feel secure, just like contemplating a big fat bank balance, which is something I've never had, I must say, might make the next man feel secure, knowing they've worked really hard to put it there. Human beings are made for hard work. We're driven, programmed by evolution to achieve. What we get to choose is how we want to work, and the advantage of a mainstream job is you get to specialize, earning enough money to pay for everything else you need. And perhaps, if you're lucky, fulfill your passion while also earning 2 days free time every week. The advantage of how I choose to work is that my work is my passion, so it will never feel like work. So I don't crave or really need free time in the way my dad did. I do my job to the amused despair of my partner 7 days a week, because quite honestly, free time to me is less enjoyable than digging up potatoes, foraging for mushrooms, installing windows, and all the other strokes that I get to paint on this incredible canvas. Thankfully, Angela is the most patient person that I have ever met. Otherwise, I'm very aware that I'd probably be a hermit for the rest of my days. You know what I need now, folks? A root cellar. I've always dreamt of building my own root cellar, and so I shall. Thank you for watching, everyone. Thank you for subscribing and supporting the channel in the many ways that you do. I hope you too are enjoying the fruits of your labour, whatever type of labour that may be. And I hope you're as blessed as I am to get to live the way you want to live, regardless of how much money you have or don't have in the bank. From me and my little family here in the autumnal pine forests of southwest Finland. Yes, autumn is here already, I'm afraid. Take care, and bye for now.
folks worked good and hard for the ones they loved and got above. Each day they punched their card, and when evening came back home again, they'd rest a while and say, "'Tis a hard old life, but for kids and wife we'll work as another day." When the sun rose low, back to work they'd go, singing on their way. Oh, for job and home to call our own, we'll work as another day. Oh, in a Quaker town till 18 years had passed. Then I packed my bags and I said farewell for a better life at last. And for 5 years more I studied hard, and the state paid harder still. For that better life I earned my debt on her education bill. Till I threw my cap and they all did clap and shake my hand and say, "Well done, my son, now work's begun, you'll pay that debt one day." Oh,